What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Maddy. And as I said on Tuesday's episode, now that we're getting back into regular season football, thank goodness, we are back with our regularly scheduled program on Tuesdays and Fridays with guests on Friday. And I have a good one coming up for you guys today as I'm here to preview 2023 Tulane season opener against the South Alabama Jaguars, who I think are very similar in terms of identity and what they were able to accomplish last season and what they're looking to prove this year. But, admittedly, I tried to watch a few of their games. The broadcast view is never that illuminating on a lot of position groups, if you will. And so I just got a ton of insight here today, and I'm really looking forward to you guys hearing what's coming up from my guest. His name is Dave Schultz. He's covered the Jaguars down in Mobile since 2019, and he's currently the host of the Sports Chat on 103.3 The GOAT FM down in Lafayette, and is also the host of the Locked On Sunbelt podcast for Locked On Network. So safe to say he has spent plenty of time covering the Sun Belt, covering South Alabama, and offered just a ton of insight on what this new regime has looked like heading into their third year under Kane Womack, what we can kind of expect out of Carter Bradley and the philosophy on offense that is very reminiscent to that of Tulane. Also some very good insight as well about Tulane's defensive coordinator, Sheil Wood, considering that South Alabama played Troy, and that was one of their few losses last year. And it should give Tulane fans, I think, some confidence heading into this matchup. But I do think that you are going to see a very ball control heavy game where both teams have a lot to prove and are really going to hit the ground running with not that much time to get going, considering the strong start, at least on Tulane's end. We talk about this in there about this being almost a potential trap game with Ole Miss on the schedule. But I think that there are a lot of guys on Tulane's team that are really hungry to come in there, shut down at least on defense, and show that, again, those names that we are all familiar with and love from the last few seasons, well, they're gone now. And these guys are really ready to make a splash here on September 2nd. All right, well, I'll just be honest. I am relatively unfamiliar with South Alabama. I do know that they're going into their second year under Kane Womack. Is that correct?
Third.
Okay.
Third. Also, I can say anything that I want, and you won't have any idea. Perfect.
Fair. Great. This will be really good and educational, hopefully. But yeah, so I hearing that they were kind of similar in their runs last year, but what is kind of the identity of the South Alabama team last year and kind of heading into the start of this season?
Well, he wants to run the football. He is the opposite of everybody else. They want to be able to run the football and play good defense. That kind of gets overlooked. They only gave up 20 points a ball game last year. They have a very experienced defense. They got an experienced offensive line. So whereas I'd like them to pass the ball around with Carter Bradley and his NFL type arm, and they have some really good wide receivers, they do like to pound the football.
Sounds, again, kind of very similar. You said it's
right.
Kind of the exception, but that's what we have going on at Tulane too. And do you guys have returning running backs coming back, or is it kind of this next man up mentality over there?
Oh, no, they have almost everybody coming back. Like 18 out of the 22 starters in the bowl game, which didn't really go their way, also in New Orleans. They're replacing Darrell Luter Jr. He went to the 49ers. Jalen Wayne was a non-drafted free agent. They have to replace James Jackson, their center, but they're replacing him with a guard. And CJ Rios, defensive end, rushing lineman, he transferred. So, but two of the guys are getting back. Keith Gallman is a safety, and Quilton Wilfon, he was a linebacker. They're going to move him to that edge spot. They have everybody coming back. LaDainian Webb is really good. He was one of those guys that they just kind of pounded into the ground, like against Georgia Southern. I'm sitting there watching. It was a road game. I'm like, you can't give it to him again. And they just gave it to him again, and they could not stop him. Had like about 250 yards in that ball game. You got Braylon McReynolds, kind of a third down back, but boy, he gets through that first line. If he's running up the middle, he can make one move and be gone. That DeMarco is kind of a power back, maybe a short yardage back, but no, everybody is mostly back except the four guys that I mentioned. They're kind of loaded heading into this year. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have on here 19 of 22 returning starters, which was kind of what Tulane had going for them last season. But yeah, you mentioned Carter Bradley, and to me, he's one of the more experienced quarterbacks at this point. And how has you kind of seen him grow? I know that their relationship with the center is extremely important, but is that kind of veteran presence there expected to kind of overtake those changing of the hands?
Yeah, only because I think the guard is relatively, is familiar with him. So he's just moving over one spot, although that spot has a big responsibility increase. what I saw from Carter Bradley, he actually joined me on the Locked On Sunbelt podcast, and I said, when he struggles, it looks like he tries to throw the ball harder, right? When he gets frustrated that things aren't going his way. And he admitted, no, that was Toledo, Carter Bradley, not so much last year. And they battled, despite winning 10 ball games, they had to come from behind to beat Georgia Southern. They had to come from behind to beat Southern Miss. They had to win. They had to come from a head victory, as I like to say, against the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. So whereas they did win 10 ball games and a couple of them in blowouts, they had to grind out some close ball games. They won some ball games that, the other teams were disappointed in losing. A couple of those, well, all three of the ones I just mentioned were on the road. So any win on college football on the road is really impressive, and doing it from behind even more so. I think about halfway during the season, they kind of got it. Jalen Wayne was the deep threat. He was, a couple of years ago, it was him on one side and Jalen Tolbert, who's now with the Dallas Cowboys in his second year. So you got to get used to another quarterback because it was a different quarterback a couple of years ago, and more of a little bit of a more accurate quarterback before. Carter Bradley, more of the I can throw it anywhere I want to type of deal. But then you had the guys underneath, Colin Lacey and Devin Boyson, who, were top 5 in the Sun Belt in receptions. And they were the ones moving the sticks. Jalen Wayne may have been, scoring deep, but it was those guys moving the sticks and keeping the offense rolling. So we'll see if just a little bit more touch from Carter Bradley and see if he can take that next step to where he's, throwing 35 touchdowns in a season. Michael Pratt seemed to have the same relatively numbers as Carter Bradley did. I'm looking forward to watching it. This is going to be I don't know how much under the radar this ball game is. There aren't that many, there's only one, game that have teams ranked. That's LSU and Florida State, and that's Sunday. And I think there's only one other game that has two teams matched up with, double digits in victories, and no one more than South Alabama and Tulane with 22 victories combined last year.
Yeah, I was going to say this kind of started off, I think, like you said, as somewhat of an under the radar game. And then, Tulane gets ranked in these preseason polls for the first time ever. And now all of a sudden, it's definitely not the same start for Tulane last year where they had UMass and Alcorn State to kind of ease into the season. I mean,
right.
I really think that this ball game is going to kind of say a lot about both teams. At least for Tulane, they have a lot of question marks of, how the running backs are going to fare. And kind of in that same note, I know that you tend to run a 3-3-5, but would you say that the defense is more stout against the pass, the run, or are they relatively balanced on both regards?
They do a good job against the run. They're trying to get after the quarterback more, and I think in essence try to create more turnovers. That's what they want to do. Everyone, talks about that. But the way to get more turnovers is to get the quarterback on the move, hit the quarterback from the blind side. That's more along the lines of what they're trying to do. Put pressure on the quarterback. And again, with all the points that they scored last year, surprisingly, again, they gave up less than 3 touchdowns a ball game.
And is it the same defensive coordinator returning over there?
It is, yes. All 3 coordinators are these guys have been together all 3 years under Kane Womack. We thought that Major Applewhite was going to get an offensive coordinating job. So we're trying to figure out, is he going to stick with Kane if this is kind of the UCF Cincinnati year for South Alabama and move on with Kane? Does he take over South Alabama? Is he waiting for a better job? Because he had some conversations. Carolina may have been one of them. He had some conversations, or maybe it was Georgia Tech. I know he talked to some teams in the offseason, but Corey Batoon is the defensive coordinator. He's familiar with the system that Kane runs, and Kane brought in James Miller from Indiana a couple of years ago. And these guys are, again, it's the same thing for the last 3 years, which makes it always interesting for me. How do you build on that if that's really good for your players, but then everybody else knows what you're running, especially in the conference. So you got to tweak what you're doing at least a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, the good thing about 3-man fronts is you can kind of drop or rush that person and throw people off a little bit. But would you say that the trenches are a point of strength for that defense, or do they lean kind of more on their secondary? Or would you kind of say at the level of the field, are they at their strongest?
Well, they have a loaded secondary because they have like 6 safeties because Keith Gallman is back and some other guys who weren't supposed to play last year have a bunch of experience. So no, they are loaded everywhere. They got a big time up defensive line up front. The corners may be a situation. They may have an issue with the corner. Again, Darrell Luter Jr. Moving on. But other than that, they again loaded everywhere. He has and when I said, they had to grind out some games last year, you kind of I forget, right? They went from not winning, not going to a bowl game to winning 5 ball games and then finishing up that season with a losing streak and then winning 10. That's a pretty impressive turnaround in 2 seasons. And now they've built up the depth. I guess the interesting thing is how good are they this year? And then, do they have that kind of season where he's getting a lot of looks? He may pull a Billy Napier and stick around only because maybe the job that he wants doesn't open up. Maybe he doesn't go to the AAC. Maybe he's waiting for an SEC job or an ACC job. So it'll be interesting to see what that is. But this team, this is the year. We're in the year of the portal, right? You never have 18 out of 22 quarterbacks back, right? Or 18 out of 22 players back. And so that's why, if they can become, my thing is, if they can become more consistently explosive, if they go more than 3 possessions, Maddy, if they go more than 3 possessions without scoring, it's either, someone got sacked, there was a turnover or a penalty, because they should not go more than 3 possessions without scoring. And they really should score a bunch of points. They should score what like Tulane was doing last year, maybe even a little bit more, right? Like 38 points a game. That's where South Alabama should be, closer to the 40-point mark this season, because they are, again, it's a bunch of experienced guys coming back.
It's interesting to describe an offense as explosive when it kind of primarily relies on that run game. But then,
right.
I kind of question, are the receivers, is it more the contested catch ability? Did they kind of eat you up in the short routage, or kind of that speed downfield in order to spread open the field?
Well, it used to be that way, right? I mean, we would, we would be amazed at how open Jalen Tolbert was or Jalen Wayne. But Lacey and Boyson are smaller guys. Boyson has a twin brother. Good luck figuring out which is which. Jaden plays safety. Devin is the wide receiver. The safety may be a little bit bigger if you want to be able to pick those guys out.
So there's twins on your guys' team right now.
Devin Boyson is the wide receiver. Jaden Boyson is the safety. And again, the defensive guy is a little bit thicker. That's the only way I could tell them apart. All right. They got the same kind of curly, frizzy hair. No, these guys, Colin Lacey, they have speed guys, right? If you get them in a nice wheel route, they'll outrun guys. But Lacey and Boyson, they do the dirty work over the middle. They really do. I would like them to incorporate the tight end a little bit more. Maybe that would open things up a little bit. No, the offense is it's more consistently explosive, because it's not about hitting the big play. It's about hitting that 3rd and 3 more often, so we get to the next play. That's what I want to see. This team should, again, score a bunch of points. And if they're not, it's probably more, which I usually don't believe, it's probably more about them than the other team, because there's just way too many options for the opposition to try and stop them.
Yeah, I mean, the Tulane has wave, don't beat the wave. It's the same kind of idea. Don't, shoot yourself in the foot. But,
right.
And then in mentioning those kind of come behind victories last year, is it just that you anticipate it to be more explosive this year based on the personnel, or, was it just bad games, or what was kind of the issue in those types of comebacks?
Well, let's think about that. In the Cajuns game, actually, one of their tight ends, DJ Thomas, he collapsed on the sideline. We don't really know why. He's had a seizure issues in the past. And so all of a sudden, one of their teammates is being rolled off the field, right? And so they got to play upon that. Southern Miss is a good football team. Right. Right. Tulane. Southern Miss is a good football team. So they tried to go into Hattiesburg, fell behind. Weather wasn't great. Bradley got knocked around in that. Desmond Trotter actually came in, had a big drive at the end of the half to kick a field goal. So that was pretty good. And the Georgia Southern game, they had the flu that week. So 17 out of the starters had the flu, including safety Yam Banks, who actually flew in that morning and played that evening. And Carter Bradley decided to make it a little bit easier on Yam Banks and the defense by throwing a pick 6 on the first play of the game. But in the end, they ended up outscoring Georgia Southern after falling behind 14, 31-10. I would just tell you, that was the first time Carter Bradley had really played, as a starting quarterback in his career. And so it takes a little bit of time, right? But this is not baseball where you get a couple of weeks and you can play, 12 to 14 games and figure things out. You're figuring it out and you get one shot. And I think about halfway during the season last year, they kind of figured out who they were and see if they can get off, getting off to better starts would be nice too. But, grinding those games out on the road is impressive. And they were 5 points away from being undefeated, right? They should have beaten UCLA. They could have beaten Troy. Western Kentucky did a number on them. They got out-coached, out-schemed, outplayed. They just lost that game. Western Kentucky was better. But I just think that they need to jump out on top a little bit more and not take, 2 or 3 possessions to figure things out, is what I would say.
Yeah, I can understand the feeling with some of Tulane's slower starts last season as well. And you said that Carter Bradley came off the bench in the middle of a game. That's correct?
He got knocked out of the game in Southern Miss.
I see.
Desmond Trotter had to come in to the end of the half, and Desmond Trotter is such a great kid, right? He had like 2 chances to be the starting quarterback. He was going to leave and then decided not to leave. He probably was going to get an MBA. He never had a real chance to start at South Alabama, and I got the quarterback. Jake Bentley was the quarterback a couple of years ago, so he was among the nation's leaders in active yardage throws, and so Desmond, he got pushed aside for him, and then he got pushed aside for Carter, and he's just a great kid. He's coming back, so they have plenty of experience. I'll tell you, as the backup quarterback, and the coaches sing his praises. For those who don't know, and I'm sure it'll get mentioned 2 or 3 or 4 dozen times, Carter Bradley is Gus Bradley's son. He is the defensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. Grew up in Jacksonville. Gus was the head coach of the Jags for a little bit back in the day.
Thank you for that fun fact. Actually, now that you're saying that, I'm like, oh, duh, that kind of seems.
Oh, it's not, yeah. Well, you'll be on the sidelines, trying to make weight for your wrestling match.
Gosh. So is Carter Bradley, you said that he's a little, I would almost kind of say Brett Favre-esque. Is that an accurate comparison? Does he have any mobility, or is he kind of able to use it?
Yes.
Does he rely on that at all? Is it a part of your guys' offensive style?
He'll move around a little bit. He's not going to beat anybody in a foot race, but he can escape and go get 4 or 5 yards. He's not, they don't run him. They don't have running plays for him. They probably should, because no one would see it, but maybe down at the goal line, you do bootleg or something like that. He's athletic. That's not part of the offense. All right. Although Ken Womack would tell you he now has an athletic quarterback, so he would tease Jake Bentley for that. But no, Carter's a gunslinger. He does have an NFL arm. He needs to figure out, I can't throw the 30-yard pass or I can't throw the 8-yard pass with the same pace as the 30-yard pass. So he's really good, really bright kid, and looking for big things. Does he get a chance to play? Michael Pratt's going to be playing for it. I know Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl is going to be in attendance. So these 2 guys are going to try and get there. Does Carter get the chance to play his final game as a college football player in the Senior Bowl? That would be pretty neat at home.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I was thinking about that this whole time of your guys' home stadium being, the Senior Bowl and everything that kind of went on there last year. But yeah, I mean, it is, as much as the Power 5 gets attention and whatnot, I always tend to think that a lot of quarterbacks that come off of really loaded teams are almost kind of really relying on that team being loaded. But I do think that there is something to be said about these G5 programs where a quarterback, to me, can really take the weight of the team on his shoulders, even with that kind of run 50-50 philosophy. I mean, we saw Michael Pratt do it in the Cotton Bowl. And to me, that was really it was all team and all the mentality that they had. But I just think that the quarterback matters a little more.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things like Pratt, like, all right, we'll do the 50-50 thing until I need to step up. And Carter did that, to get them back into the ball game against Georgia Southern before they ran the clock out with the Danian Webb, probably in the Southern Miss game as well. Made a heck of a pass at the last minute. Jalen Wayne actually made a really good catch to set up the game-winning field goal against the Raging Cajuns. So, yes, they do rely. They want it to be 50-50, but Carter has that ability to say, all right, boys, you've done enough. I'm going to take you to the victory. All right, follow me.
Yeah, so I mean, Willie Fritz kind of said that he sees a lot of South Alabama and Tulane, and as we're continuing to talk, I could kind of see just a ton of parallels, and especially just kind of thinking about, like you said, the turnaround. I mean, Tulane's was the greatest in college football history, but it's nothing to sneeze at to go from 5 to 10 wins. I mean, that's 50%. I don't think that's actually a correct math, but it's twice as many more wins there. And so just kind of curious about the culture and the way that football has kind of gone over the past couple of years. Is this something that is new in terms of this level of success, or something that they used to have in the past, or what is kind of the recent modern era been like?
Well, first of all, my understanding is that there would be no math. Second of all, no, they used to play, they've only been an FBS program for about 15 years, maybe even less. So they were really good when they were playing, like FCS teams and below. All right. So they would, go like 8-0 against anybody who they could find. But that is by far, they've never won. I don't think they've won more than 8 ball games before, and they won 10 last year. So it is a culture change. And having covered college football, I guess I did a little bit in Miami, but a real in Lafayette and then Mobile and back here in Lafayette, Ken Womack has he has a certain confidence, but not cocky, right? So when I came here before, Mark Hudspeth, he rah, in your face kind of coach, right? Big salesman and a good coach. All right. But a little bit different. Billy Napier, kind of the quiet confidence. Maddy, we have open practices at South Alabama. We could go watch the whole thing, right? When they have, which I can't do during the week, but when they would have their scrimmages, we can watch the whole thing. That's a confidence coach, right? And so he has turned things around. They have expectations. He comes from a football coaching background. He knew he was going to be doing this. He was the defensive coordinator before. He went to Indiana, and now he's back. And that's why I kind of think he may not jump ship at the first opportunity because, first of all, he's probably making a lot of money. And second of all, he wants to make sure it's the right fit. He is a Mississippi guy. So, we don't know when Lane's leaving. That could be at any point in time. And, unfortunately, Zach Arnett's in his first year at Mississippi State under unfortunate circumstances. So those two jobs probably not opening up anytime soon, but we'll see. Again, I think he's going to stick around South Alabama. They need a training facility. That's the last thing that they need. They have an outstanding baseball, softball. They play in a great gym for football or for basketball, track and field, soccer. And now the new stadium, it's only been open since 2020. And it's perfect, 24,000 fans. The students actually come out and do a great job of filling it up, but they need that one more training facility. I still think they're, taking, their ice baths and kiddie pools after practicing in 100 degrees.
Listen, Tulane kind of does the same thing out there. Sometimes it's just kind of what's available. Yeah, I walk by like 6 guys that are taking their ice baths as they're heading out, but we're also
which isn't great because they're still outside.
Right. You just have to keep adding ice. But we're also in the process of building that indoor facility. I think as you guys could see too, with success comes kind of, a heightened interest and more attention kind of paid to those things. And so is it something that the students are engaged in at South Alabama, or was last year something that kind of changed things? Because at least from Tulane's perspective, and as a former alumni, I went to, I'd say I could count on one hand how many games I went to as an alumni. And I've just been really astonished by the turnaround, at least on Tulane's side. But is that kind of been something that's changed as a result of last season, or was that already kind of built in?
So they used to play at Lad People Stadium where the Senior Bowl used to be. So that was a little bit of a trek trying to get cross town during the games. I guess they would have buses come and take the kids to Lad. But they do a good job of filling the stadium. So the students sit right behind the visitors bench, and they fill up the sections from the 20 to the 20, which on TV looks like the whole stadium's filled, right? Over here in Lafayette, the students are in the corner, and there's still probably about 2,000 of them, but they're in 2 sections and kind of stuck in like where the 10-yard line is. So the TV flashes across, and it doesn't look like anybody's there. So they do a good job with that. We'll see if they get off to a good start. And we've been talking about that. If somehow South Alabama does beat Tulane, they get Southeastern at home and then Oklahoma State. And then all of a sudden they're ranked for probably the first time in program history. And so now let's see if, they start, selling out. They haven't really sold out the stadium. The first year was COVID. The second year, it rained or there was weather almost every single game, literally every single game. And then you're always dealing with Auburn and Alabama. So half the South Alabama fan base is Auburn, half the, fan base is Alabama. They will move the ball game, their last ball game, depending on the Iron Bowl. So they have done that before. And so if they can get off to a 3-0 start, and all of a sudden, they're getting national pub and all of a sudden Womack's on the national radio shows and doesn't have any more time for the local guys, it could be one of those years, and they will come out. I think Mobile is one of those front running cities, and well, hopefully, again, 24,000 is just not that many. Tulane does a great job of packing it. It'd be nice to see South Alabama do that, and I think they will if they can geez, if they can only beat Tulane or Oklahoma State, they may be able to pack it and start off the season 2-1 and still have one of those great seasons.
I'd kindly request that the latter scenario happens,
Right.
but
Right.
but no, it's true. I mean, it really, even last year, it kind of took a while for the student body to kind of get with the program, if you will. And, everyone showed up for the Memphis homecoming game, and Tulane went up something like 35-0, and then everyone left, and then Memphis made a comeback. So I think that was the last time that fans learned that you can't really leave before the game is over. But I'm really now just intrigued by this matchup. I mean, I almost feel like the way you described Carter Bradley would be the way that I might have described Michael Pratt a few seasons ago, but I just think that he's worked on his accuracy and his ability to spread the ball out so much. Having that kind of quiet confidence in the head coach with that emphasis on running the ball and clock control, and then having like you said, everyone has a turnover heavy type defense, but also having that ability to really, again, shut down the run with that 3-3-5 front. So to me, this could be a game that special teams might kind of decide things. And I'm kind of curious what that unit is like for you guys.
Well, watch out for that. We'll see who is doing it. Anthony Eager is a freshman, and he made the 2 deep. And I think the only guy beating him in the 100-yard dash, although a little bit younger, is Ryan Williams, and he's already committed to Alabama. He is a junior at Saraland that people may have seen on ESPN last weekend. So we'll see if he's involved in that. I know Colin Lacey is involved with that. The reason they got back in that Georgia Southern ball game is because they did a fake field goal or a fake punt to Todd Justice. We call him the Jet, although it seemed like he was running backwards to go forwards. He was running so fast. And if he waited for his blocker, he would have scored a touchdown on the fake punt. Of course, they tried a fake field goal against UCLA, and that did not work. And
sorry, you cut out for a second. I did not catch any of what you just said.
The whole thing?
Not the whole thing.
Do we get Anthony Eager?
That's where I lost you.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
3, 2, 1. I'm blaming David Grubb. 3, 2, 1. All right. So we'll see if Anthony Eager, he's a freshman. He made the 2 deep. He's a sprinter as well. I think the only guy faster in the state of Alabama is Ryan Williams, who plays for Saraland. People may have seen him on ESPN. But they have Colin Lacey, maybe Braylon McReynolds is back there as well. As a kicker, they have Diego Guajardo, who is among the best in the Sun Belt. And they are breaking in a new punter. I think he's from Finland. They had Jack Brooks, and I'm so disappointed he's leaving because he's like 30 years old and like the oldest player in college football. One of those Australian punters that comes over and could have stayed another year, but I think he went home and just decided, all right, I've had enough of school. I'm going to stay back here down under. So they are breaking in a new punter. They did have some good success with a fake punt against Georgia Southern that really turned that game around, and they messed up a fake field goal against UCLA that cost them a chance at the victory. They do care about special teams, and special teams is one of those things that nobody cares about until they mess up or make a play. And they have, it'll be interesting to see if that does come into play in this ball game, which I think is a toss-up.
Yeah, no, that intrigues me quite a bit because to me, a lot of teams, I just can't get over the fact that USC didn't have a special teams coordinator. And then that game went down the way that it did at the end. And really, if you go back to Tulane's loss against Southern Miss, they had a blocked field goal, a blocked punt, and a missed field goal. And it was a 3-point loss. So you could argue easily that special teams could win or lose you the game. And now I'm really curious about that. So were you guys running that Australian punt style under the previous punter? And are you going to be changing the punting style now, or?
That's a good question. No, I don't think so. I think Jack Brooks just had a kind of a booming leg. Maybe once in a while he took a running start, but he, and a punter, those guys, especially these days, can change the ball game, right? That was Troy. That's how Troy won the Sun Belt last year. They would run for like 3 first downs, punt it away, and pin you back. And so sometimes those guys get overlooked, but a punter can really save you, especially if he's punting, not at the back of the end zone, but like in the shadow of the end zone. And all of a sudden, instead of being, on the plus side of the 50, maybe they're at the 40 or the 35, in their own territory. So punter is big. We'll see. He was supposed to be trained under Jack Brooks, but Jack Brooks took off.
Listen, I just watching Ryan Wright my first year, I was mesmerized by his punts. And there were a lot of games that year that Tulane was really kind of close. And to me, one of the primary reasons for that was how his ability to coffin corner just multiple times, drive starting on the 2-yard line. It just could completely, like you said, change the game.
Well, nobody uses a coffin corner anymore. That's awesome that you're saying that. I'm not even sure anybody knows that, especially people your age.
Yeah, I know. We don't even see him. I guess
no.
Come around that often anymore.
Everybody hopes that it bounces on the
punts.
5.
Right.
Yeah. Bounces on the 5, and hopefully it bounces in the wrong direction or the right direction if you're the punting team. So no one knows what the coffin corner is. So that's a good call by you.
And I'm just kind of curious as well. You mentioned Troy's defense last year, and how was it kind of playing against Shield Wood's defense? Because that's kind of something that I'm curious about. And at nothing else, there's sort of that experience level for South Alabama, at least knowing a style of play.
Yeah, they were good, right? They had the all-time NCAA leading tackler, also from Mobile. He's left. They were good. They knew they were good. They could get after the quarterback, stop the run. That's a game that South Alabama could have won, not necessarily should have won. Bradley hit Devin Boyson streaking down the sideline. Looked like he caught it. They overturned it, then overthrew him when he was open again on the same play. And then there was a phantom play when he was rolling out right and threw it back to the tight end to the left. But those were the only 3 chances that South Alabama had. I guess they kicked a couple of field goals and couldn't punch it in. But Troy, I'll tell you, for the most part, let's run it. Get up. We got our 10 points. Let's not turn the ball over. Let's not go 3 and out, and we'll rely on the defense. So they were really good. They were really good last year. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Did Tulane pay moving costs to Lance Guidry? How'd that work? Did he get a paycheck?
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure about that, as it's such a real blip on the radar at first. I was like, what are you talking about? And then I realized, but no, I really have enjoyed watching Shield Wood. I think he kind of brings that aggressive punch that Tulane almost kind of needs to me with all of the turnover going on that side of the ball. And so would you say that was more of kind of a pass rush heavy defense, and, were they kind of man or zone, or what did the coverage kind of look like for them?
Well, Carlton Marshall was a pain in the tush. All right. Carlton Marshall is 5'8". You can't block him if you're a 6'3" tackler guard. He can go underneath you. And, if you're that kind of athlete, you're really frustrated by somebody who you should be better than. And yes, I know he got a couple extra years, but that tells you what kind of heart he has. And he was really the captain of that defense. He was making plays all over the place. They were an attacking defense. They don't want to let you sit down. They are not a bend, but don't break defense. That's not the way Troy plays. Offensively, they're kind of like that, right? We'll take what you give us, and then we'll play defense. But they are an attacking defense, and John Summerall ruined it for every other first-year coach. You're going into year 3, and why haven't you won anything? John Summerall over there, he won in year 1. So step it up. So he's done a great job up there. They're looking for more for their offense. Gunnar Watson is the quarterback. He was in and out last year with Jarrett Dagey, the transfer from West Virginia. He actually came off the bench and made a huge 3rd down play to turn over the field and waste a couple of more minutes. But they're going to, they have some guys to replace. Marshall did miss some games last year, so some guys did get experience. They also have to replace their center, Jake Andrews, and a couple of guys on that offensive line. So Troy does have some question marks, but they were picked to win it. I don't know what that means by the coaches. Some of these coaches before the camp didn't know their own teams, meanwhile, everyone else's teams. But they should still be in contention in the West.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you said that they're kind of not a bend, don't break defense, and that it was kind of exactly what Tulane was last year. So it's really going to be entirely different. And then, with the knowledge that you have of South Alabama, assuming that style of play kind of remains on defense, how does South Alabama win this game?
Well, South Alabama, they're not only they want to be more aggressive, they're very big when they get in the red zone. They want to stop you from scoring a touchdown. All right. So they will clamp down a little bit more, maybe in the red zone. I think they're going to have to outscore Tulane. That's the thing. If this is under a 30-point ball game, I think South Alabama is in trouble. South Alabama needs to put up, 32 or 35, 42, 45 points a game. That's what they should be doing on a regular basis. They really need to outscore some teams. And then all of a sudden you only need 1 or 2 extra stops. And they were good last year. Defensively, they were good last year. And Darrell Luter actually didn't have as good a year as he had the year before. So that's the way I think. I happen to think, I don't know why the line started out at 7.5. I guess that was basically because someone beat USC and someone got blown out by Western Kentucky. So the last we saw these two teams, one was winning a thrilling Cotton Bowl, and the other one got hammered in the New Orleans Bowl. We'll see. Also, I suggested that maybe the line changed when people realized how many people South Alabama was bringing back, and that Tajay Spears guy was pretty good. Right, all of a sudden he's starting to make plays in the preseason. It's like, where's Tajay Spears from? Tulane. Oh, he's not at Tulane anymore. He's in the NFL. That may be an issue for the Green Wave. So I think South Alabama is just as good. If this was at in Mobile, I think they would be favored by 3 or 4. I do think South Alabama wins the ball game. Been asking this for everybody. Maybe you can answer me this. I don't really believe you can have a trap game, right? First game of the season. You've been working on that thing for 9 months. And it'd be one thing if Tulane was going to Ole Miss, but Ole Miss is coming to Tulane. That's the biggest ball game as Tulane has had. I mean, ever at home. You can tell me that. So I don't know if you can have a trap game your first game, but if you can, this would be it. With all due respect to South Alabama.
I would say so. I would say the Oklahoma game that was supposed to be at Tulane in 2021 would have been the biggest one. And then unfortunately that went over to Norman and I was not able to make it over there. But yeah, in terms of a home game, but again, I knowing Willie Fritz and just knowing the way that he has built winning programs and winning cultures everywhere he goes, I tend to think that they learned their lesson in the Southern Miss loss last year. And it does you no good to look ahead. It's one thing, again, if I'd be more worried about the week 3 Southern Miss repeat being another trap game, because if you come off of that Ole Miss win, riding a little bit of high, that's to me where I see it more. But knowing that, again, you guys have 19 of 22 starters returning. I don't have the exact numbers for Tulane, but as you mentioned, I mean, Tajay is gone. And I remember there were coaches talking about that at the Senior Bowl where they were saying they're really grateful that Tajay is here and not going to be coming back to Tulane. But I will say the one thing that Tulane has in their bag now is a complete unknown there at running back. And I think you're going to see a little bit of a committee, but a lot of different styles. And that surprise kind of might be what Tulane needs to at least kind of figure that out and get over the hump. But with, again, both of these teams being such run heavy teams, it's just funny. I could either see this being like a 46-45 type win or just like a complete slugger at this point where both of them are trying to control the clock and run the ball out. And you said that they're really stout on the red zone defense. And just to kind of wrap up every level of the field at this point, red zone offense wise, I mean, Tulane used to put Tajay out there in the Wildcat formation relatively often. Is that something that we could see kind of worked into South Alabama's arsenal? Or are they just kind of primarily traditional with the way that they use their running backs? And then if so, what is kind of their threat in the red zone?
They're traditional. They may do that tight end throwback every once in a while. That seems to work. I don't know if you can do that to begin with because you haven't faked anybody out. But yeah, they're gonna try to run it with LaDainian Webb. They could try to run it with Marco Lee. No, they're straightforward when they get into the red zone offensively. There's not too much trickeration at that point in time. Then it's just as probably what they would say is just execution.
That's kind of where Tulane is at as well. Just as kind of my final question, are there any kind of dark horse players that you think might not be getting enough attention that Tulane fans should kind of be looking out for heading into Saturday?
Well, I mean, keep an eye on those wide receivers, Voisin and Colin Lacey. But I would keep an eye on Anthony Eager. All right. True freshmen don't usually make two deeps these days, and not certainly on the road. So I don't know how much of a chance he's going to get to play. You figure he is. It's an evening game, so the field's going to be hot, gathering that heat all day long. I would presume he's going to play a little bit. He's got a ton of speed. When I saw him in high school, he caught 3 touchdowns from 3 different wide receivers in the same game, or 3 different quarterbacks. One of them was a wide receiver. So he's really good. Again, I don't know how much time he's going to get. I would hope they would try to incorporate the tight end a little bit more. Sefcik is one of the tight ends, so see if he gets some playing time. But for the most part, they're a straight ahead. See if you can stop the run. See if you can cover our guys, and Bradley will try to hit someone over the top every now and then.
It seems simple, but then again, there are teams trying to do just a lot sometimes, and sometimes just kind of doing the simple, run the ball, have the quarterback do the correct thing, kind of just works out. And that's kind of, I think, how Tulane made their run last year. Should we be stupid and do score predictions? I tend to always feel that they are a little random, but I figured I
They're
would
very
throw it at
random.
you and see what you
Very
were
random. I'll give you
offhand.
38-31 South Alabama.
That is so weird because I was going to give a similar one and give Tulane, but
You're
I
such
am
a liar.
gonna.
You're such a liar. You're
No,
just
I
doing that to
really
make
was.
it weird.
But I like, as much as you say that they need to be explosive, I think that Tulane's defense is coming out with a lot to prove, and there are a lot of chip on their shoulders that people might not expect necessarily coming off of that year of success. I think the linebackers especially are kind of just tired of hearing about Dorian and Nick, and they would like to be known as Corey Plate, Seuss Machado, Tyler Grubbs, etc. So I'm going to give it to them, and I'm going to say 34-17 Tulane.
If they hold South Alabama to less than 3 touchdowns, they're going to deserve to win that football game.
Fair enough.
No
My
doubt about
score
that.
predictions are always horribly off, but we just figured we'd give this one a
Me
try
too.
heading into week 1. Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
You bet.
All right, y'all. I hope you got as much insight from that as I did. I met Dave Schultz a few years ago down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. Again, that being at South Alabama Jaguars Stadium down there. And one of my favorite things in this industry is really the relationships that I formed with people. And so it's just really awesome to have these opportunities to be able to speak to these guys and get, again, such a wealth of information about the Jaguars and really have an idea of what Tulane fans can look for on, keys to victory coming up, heading into this opener where, again, I think both of these teams might have a quieter chip on their shoulder than you might expect. Just again, looking at South Alabama, that the turnaround that they had under Kane Womack these last few seasons, he comes in, they win 5 years their first season, and then go 10-2 last year, or 7-1 in conference play. And the way that the Sun Belt is set up, they have an East and West division, whereas the AAC, it's just, the top 2 dogs play for that conference championship. Fortunately, their loss to Troy, which was a 10-6, really, 1960s football type loss, put them in the second place with Troy having that West Division seed. And again, hearing the way that he described Shield Wood's defense, I think should really have fans excited to see this Angry Wave defense come out on Saturday. I've said that they have looked aggressive and hungry, and it really looks like there's been tight coverage. Again, running backs going up against the linebackers, hard hitting tackling that was all the way back in spring. But again, the bend don't break zone defense worked really well last year, but Shield Wood, I think, just brings that kind of punch that Dave did a really good job of describing. I mean, to hold the other team to 6 points cannot be sneezed at. And then again, I brought up the takeaway margin of 27 turnovers, 8th in the FBS last season, but it was just really great to get that, firsthand insight of someone that's really familiar with the Sun Belt and the Jaguars. And it just strikes me how similar, even though Kane Womack is younger than Willie Fritz, I always just think about this in my head, is it better to have the offensive genius or the defensive genius at the top of the helm? And most people tend to say offense. Yes, I am a defense-minded person, and so I do kind of acknowledge that bias, but it sticks out to me that both Kane Womack and Willie Fritz started as defensive coordinators and both became head coaches. And the emphasis they play on special teams and controlling the clock and running the football. As much as he said that they have an explosive offense, in the game that I was able to watch, they do really rely on that running back committee. And I think that's something you're going to see again, Tulane lean a little more on in terms of that rotation this year, but a lot of teams want to get out there and it's the passing era. The last game we watched Tulane in was against the active Heisman Trophy winner who just about tore them up in the air. And so it'll be really interesting to see them kind of meet their own match on the field. And at least in terms of being able to practice and knowing the kind of identity of Tulane, it does seem like it matches up well. And I think you'll really see what the trenches and what this linebacker group is made of with them running the football that much, including really that downhill ability by these safeties that I think are really going to come out there and hit hard. Just think about, again, Bailey Despaney, a guy returning. He made one of those 4th down stops in his tracks at Kansas State, coming in for relief when all those guys went out to get IVs. And Cam Pettisclo, I talked about him in the last episode, but he just kind of, again, from what I saw on tape and from what I've seen in scrimmages, has that tackling ability, has good form, can really scrape traffic well. And so shutting down the run game, I think, will be really important for Tulane. But the special teams, I always say that is such a hidden key to games, and it is not lost on Tulane or Willie Fritz how important that is and all the attention and times I've talked about that. But they're going to be meeting their match again, and someone that ran a fake punt last year, ran a fake field goal last year. Some of them didn't work, but that's the risks that you get of running those kind of trick plays that I think you see a lot more in the NFL a lot of the time than you do in college football, And so that'll just be a really interesting thing to kind of watch unfold. And then which defense is the better, for Sunbelt for South Alabama. Again, they have a ton of returning guys coming back, and a lot of those guys are on defense. But the chip on the shoulder thing for Tulane this year, I really think you guys are going to be surprised by, despite coming in seeing as, poised to win the conference, all of this stuff about being in the New Year's Six Bowl and people asking, is Tulane going to get ahead of themselves? Can they handle this level of success? It still seems like they feel like they have something to prove. Those running backs want to prove that they're the new, it's not the new Tajay Spears. It is this running back room, and the same with that linebacker room and the safety group. And it just has felt like every day at practice, just the standard is set a little bit higher. And as much as, again, we talked about if there's the potential for this to be a trap game, but I think that does a disservice to South Alabama and the attention to the game plan that Tulane has put in. I absolutely do not think they're overlooking this, looking at Ole Miss. Otherwise, that 1-0 mentality, really, that would be somewhat of a problem. And, sure, it's, again, I've said it comes down to a snap, comes down to a bad snap. But this game could be won and lost on special teams for all we know. We gave score predictions, but it's always such a shot in the dark for me, unless I'm able to do really fastidious film study on the other team. It's just ultimately kind of throwing darts at a dartboard. But I think both of these teams want the nation to see that they're ready to make a splash and start strong. And again, Tulane really does not have that much a margin for error with the start of the schedule that they have compared to last season. But again, I really appreciate Dave Schultz for coming on and giving us all that insight on what we can expect from the Jaguars heading up to this weekend. Again, that is Saturday, September 2nd at Yeoman Stadium. Kickoff is at 7:00. And myself, Corey Glore, and Steve Barrows, your broadcast crew, will be on 104.1 hour before kickoff at 6 p.m., previewing what is probably the most anticipated season opener for Tulane in the 21st century.